Hi everyone, welcome back. And the topic of this video is governments as key players in international public relations. In this lecture, you learn why governments across the world spend billions of dollars to impress citizens of other nations, how they do it, and what missile weapons have to do with public relations. I'm actually very excited about this topic because that's what my dissertation was about, and I really hope you'll enjoy the story. Governments are actually the oldest player in international public relations. They were the only ones who had all the abilities to trade internationally and have international exchanges long before multinational corporations came into picture. As I've mentioned in the first lecture, during the Second World War, governments were using international propaganda to influence public opinion among their allies and also to demoralize their enemies. But during the Cold War, it's when international public relations practiced by governments was institutionalized and received its own label, public diplomacy. And of course, the key players there were the United States and the Soviet Union. Back then, at some point in time, both countries acquired the second strike capabilities. And the nuclear war didn't really make sense because if, let's say, the United States would launch a weapon against the USSR would be able to detect the weapon and then strike back before the American missile reaches the Soviet Union. So even though everyone could launch a rocket, everyone could strike and destroy the other country, it was assured mutual destruction. So no matter who starts first, both countries are going to be destroyed, probably along with the rest of the world. So at that point, with all of that being said, traditional war was really meaningless. But there were two superpowers with two conflicting ideologies, socialism and capitalism, and each of those superpowers had their own idea of what the world order should look like. And at some point they realized that if they get people to like them, if they get people to admire their values, their culture, they would win hearts and minds of people, and that way they would just be able to make them their allies without having to, go to war with any nation. And so this concept, ability to get what you want through attraction rather than coercion or payments, received its own label, and it's called soft power. That's what we use as a key concept in public diplomacy. So how does public diplomacy work? Well, the assumption behind it is that a foreign government can influence the government of another country by influencing its electorate, that is citizens of that second country that they want to influence. For example, people in the United States generally like Canada and Canadians, although I know you guys make fun of them. But should a president of the United States have some conflict with the Canadian government, it would be really unlikely that that president receives support from its citizens to go to war with Canada or have maybe some kind of sanctions against Canada, just because we've been friends for a long time. Why would you do it to the Canadian people? And this is how it's supposed to be working, right? And then consider another example, Russia. Russia has been viewed by many in the United States traditionally as an enemy, and therefore that's why Trump's neutral position towards Russia outrages so many people in this country. Like, why would you be supportive of someone who's been our enemy for such a long time? And that's why he gets criticized, right? So Trump is probably an exception. He goes against the grain when he refuses to make certain policy decisions against Russia or adopt some policy decisions that benefit Russia. But most American presidents would probably not make policies that would benefit Russia in any way. And say the same thing goes for Russia. No Russian president would adopt policies to benefit America because he would not receive support from their citizens. At the same time, if they adopt policies that make things for America way more difficult, that's when they get their legitimacy, and that's are the policies that actually get supported by traditional Russian society. And that's why it's been very difficult for both nations to reach any kind of agreement. So public diplomacy works to improve the image of a country sponsor, that is the country practicing public diplomacy, either in a certain target country or in the international arena in general. There are many definitions of public diplomacy, but this is the definition that I like and consider the most concrete and complete. So public diplomacy is a specific case of public relations defined as the management of communication between the government of the sponsor nation and the citizens of the target country with the ultimate purpose to influence policy decisions of the target state by enhancing the image of the country among the citizens of the target nation. Some of the key strategies that public diplomacy professionals employ include things like international broadcasting. Think about Al Jazeera, which is a TV channel funded by Qatar, which is a state in the Middle East. And that TV channel is broadcasting in America and other countries. Another example would be RT, formerly Russia Today. This is a TV channel funded by the Russian government. And then also BBC World is also an international broadcasting station funded by the British government. So all these media broadcast in America as well as in many other countries, and they represent a certain viewpoint on the international events that favors the view of their governments. Now let me show you two examples of RT.com and BBC World main pages. And I'm filming this in August 2020, a few months before the American elections, presidential elections. So it's not a secret that the current Russian government would prefer Trump to win his re-election, whereas the Great Britain would prefer the Democratic Party, Party's candidate Joe Biden. So let's compare what the Russian state-owned media tries to convey versus the British-owned state media. So both are focused on Joe Biden right now, yet the Russian headlines picture Joe Biden as racist, as an incapable and a China-backed candidate. At the same time, BBC portrays him as a great guy who is about to appoint a female as his running mate and who cares about Americans' health so much that he decided to accept the nomination remotely. See the difference? It's all about the facts that you choose to highlight and the facts that you choose to ignore in your coverage. And that's the essence of manipulating public opinion. The United States also have international broadcasting, state-owned broadcasting outlets that are broadcasting in some other countries. For example, the Voice of America in Russia. This is, again, American-backed TV channel, and a bunch of radio stations in the Middle East and Latin America. And then cultural and educational exchanges is another strategy often employed by public diplomacy programs. Consider, for example, the Fulbright Scholarship. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this is an American initiative for international students. They offer smart students from all around the world an opportunity to come to America and to study here and receive a degree that is fully paid by the US government. The idea behind it is that these young, smart, and very highly educated people would come back to their country and they would be the advocates of the American values. They would be the friends of America in their own country. And oftentimes those people are actually, they become the leaders in their small country. They become government officials. So that way America earns friends among the elites of other nations. And it really does work. I actually have a friend who was a Fulbright student at UF, and she actually came here to just get a prestigious education from the United States. She hated Gainesville and she couldn't wait to go back to Russia, and now the program is over. She's doing her internship in DC right now, and she doesn't really want to leave the country, but that's actually a requirement. So after the program, students are supposed to come back to their country and spend their 2 years before they can come back to the United States for any reason. The next strategy is sporting events. For example, hosting the Olympics or other major international championships. These things also serve for public diplomacy purposes, because they attract a lot of media attention, they attract a lot of international visitors to the country, and that also works to improve the image of the hosting nation. For example, Russia got a ton of positive media coverage after the World Cup, Soccer World Cup of 2018. You can see some of the headlines here. When I was in Latin America, soccer, you know, probably soccer is really huge over there, and I met a lot of people who actually went to Russia, and the championship was the only reason they would ever go to Russia. And they went specifically for the World Cup. And there was so much admiration about the country and its people and its cuisine. And so, yes, it's a huge reputational win, even though our national team wasn't doing that great in the championship. And finally, there's a concept called mediated public diplomacy. And that is public diplomacy carried through the media of the target nation. Think about traditional media relations. PR practitioners publish press releases, they pitch media outlets. Governments do exact same things, not only for their own reporters, not only for their national media, but also for international journalists. They hold briefings, they publish reports and press releases in many different languages. English typically is, English version is actually available for most of the government websites. So if journalists are interested in a certain event, they could easily go on that government's website and read an English version of press releases. So yeah, it's again, it's probably an analogy of media relations and public relations. So in public diplomacy, it's just called mediated public diplomacy. As an example, I will link Vladimir Putin's interview with Fox News anchor Chris Wallace a couple years ago. The interview has 1.3 million views just on YouTube, but there were also, it was aired on Fox News as well. And so as of today, it was a huge exposure, and it was a great opportunity for Putin to explain Russia and to explain his perspective on what's happening in the global arena. So public diplomacy deals with country image in terms of general favorability of a country to influence international policy decisions pertaining to that country. But policy decisions is not the only thing that is influenced by country image. Imagine you're buying a car and you're choosing between two options. One of the cars was manufactured in China, the other one was manufactured in Germany. All other things being equal, which one would you prefer? Another example, would you prefer buying a t-shirt that was manufactured and designed in Italy or a t-shirt that was manufactured in Bangladesh? I think the answers are pretty obvious. German products are known for their precision, durability, whereas Chinese products are known, have a reputation for being low quality but cheap price products. Italy is famous for its style and chic, and Bangladesh is known as one of the capitals of those famous sweatshops. It actually turns out that the country of origin of a product also influences buying decisions. And just like normal brands such as Nike or Apple, countries can also act as brands for everything that's being produced in those countries. That also means that countries can actually build brands of their own, and that process is called nation branding. The term nation brand refers to the unique multi-dimensional blend of elements that provide a nation with culturally grounded differentiation and relevance for all of its target audiences. In plain English, a nation brand is something, basically a certain element or a set of elements that distinguishes one country from all the other countries in the eyes of international publics. Sometimes this process is really sporadic. That is, Italian designers had no intention of making Italy the world fashion capital, right? But some nation branding efforts are actually strategic efforts. That is, they were planned and orchestrated by governments. For example, Estonia, a teeny tiny country in Eastern Europe, has managed to build its brand as the world's most advanced digital society. This was called the Estonia Project. It's actually a paradise right now. It's a paradise for digital startups, and they are the first nation in the world to offer a digital residency to people from outside of Estonia. And that digital residency actually provides the same access to Estonia's various economic services, electronic services that a physical resident would receive. And that way, anyone can actually easily open a business and run a business in Estonia without having to be present in that country. As a result, this tiny nation ranked #1 among all countries in the world for startup friendliness, for entrepreneurial activity and digital health index, and #2 for internet freedom. Unlike public diplomacy, which is more about political and cultural influence, nation branding benefits primarily countries' economies. And here are some of the areas that specifically can benefit from nation branding. For example, trade, obviously. Let's say Japan is very famous for its electronics. Germany is famous for their cars and industrial machines. France has their brand built around being the world's most fancy winery. They also sell good cheeses. They also export perfume and fashion. And then Korea is famous for its cosmetics and then technology as well. Italy, famous for its apparel and wine. US primarily exports technology and pop culture. And so for any brand or any company, let's say that's German, if they decide to make cars just because they are a German company that is completely like a blank state for consumers, just from knowing that this company is from Germany, this car brand is from Germany, it's going to set certain expectations for customers, and it's going to positively influence customers' willingness to try out those cars and those German products, right? That way nation branding actually can benefit the country's trade and can boost the country's trade. And then there's another area that is foreign investment. Things like being a tax haven benefit countries like the Cayman Islands, the Dominican Republic, because many companies are actually willing to register their companies there to pay lower taxes than they would have to pay in their home countries. Also, there's education also benefits from that, because by building a brand around a country with very strong education system, we bring international students to the country who pay to schools, outstate international student tuition. Also, they spend money in the country, which also helps the economy. And then another thing that benefits from nation branding is immigration of skilled workforce. And for example, the United States is very famous for it, and the United Arab Emirates, just because of how they branded themselves as a country with a lot of opportunities for skilled workforce. There are so many very skilled workers who are willing to leave their home countries and come here to further benefit those countries, I mean the United States and the United Arab Emirates. And finally, tourism. It's another area that could receive a really good boost from nation branding, because there are some countries that are primarily known for being tourist paradise, like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Italy, Spain, France. So by advertising themselves as those tourist destination, they bring in international visitors, they bring in money, they boost their own economies. Okay, to recap, today we've talked about how governments use international public relations to gauge political influence in the international arena. That's called public diplomacy. They use public diplomacy strategies to be able to exert influence through attraction rather than coercion and payments. And we've also talked about governments engaging in the process of nation branding to benefit their economies by making them known worldwide for certain things, be that quality of certain products or cultural aspects, or their technological advancements, or low tax policies, or other things to get more benefits to their economy.